Welcome to Behind the Brush podcast or blogcast. We're not sure what we're calling it, but we're doing interviews with some of the most amazing artists. This is episode 5 on December 12th on a Thursday with Paul Stoll. What's up, Paul?
In Idaho.
In Idaho, yeah. What are we doing in Idaho? It's freezing over here, but in a good way.
Oh, no, it's nice. It's
yeah,
nice.
Especially when we got a heated shop. We were actually at the Sullivan's doing some really cool stuff, which you guys will see if you go to Grand Nationals this next coming year. Check that out. We'll do a podcast with them later. But right now we're talking to Paul. And Paul, where are you from? What do you do?
I'm from, you don't really want to know the whole story, but basically Southern California.
Cool.
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley area in Sutherland.
Oh.
And I grew up when custom painting was just alive and well.
That's awesome. What was your inspirations? How did you even get involved?
Drag racing is what hooked me. I'd go to the drag races with a neighbor, and I'd look at all the funny cars and the drag cars. Bill Carter basically was the king of that.
Oh, the man, dude.
It's like
legend.
I had to do that. I had to do that. Sling paint looked like that.
So, when you got involved in it, did you do that through vocational school? Did you have to apprentice? Did you just go to a shop?
Okay, so yeah, I thought I was, this can't be too hard. I bought some spray cans and started playing around. And I had a friend that really helped me. Tex Smith. He was an editor of Hot Rod magazine and started Rod and Custom. And so Tex knew I was into this stuff, and he told me I need to go talk to the people that do it and get their advice. So I went and saw Bill Carter and I saw Walt Trey, and both those guys told me that I needed to go to school and learn how to do this. And I thought, oh, they don't want any competition. They're trying to shoo me off.
Oh, yeah.
But it was the best advice because when you're doing this stuff, things go wrong. And when you're painting and when you're custom painting, you're stacking layers and layers of paint on too quick. You're doing everything that you really probably shouldn't. So you got to know how to get out of it and how to fix it. And so I really haven't had a problem with that. But I've watched other painters. And I'd say the ones that suffered the most were really great airbrush artists that would do an amazing mural, and then they'd hand the car over to a painter and he'd screw it up.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, there's plenty of stories like that. I've airbrushed over the years, and I've had to deal with it. So, yeah, you're definitely telling the truth there.
Yeah, you want to be in total control of your job, start to finish.
That'd be nice, But as pinstripers and airbrushers, we've run across a situation where you can't possibly do that. And you wouldn't think somebody could mess up a clear job, but it happens.
Yeah.
It's so wild.
Then they sand through it and into the work, and now we're done. Throw it away. Start over.
Yeah, so you started when you started to paint, was it just race cars at first only?
No, I was doing street cars.
Okay, cool.
I didn't really know anybody to get started with, so I worked for a place called Herbert Meek in North Hollywood, and Andy was a drag boat racer.
Mm.
So I actually started painting some drag boats. And then years later, after I finished school, I worked for a place called Beach Enterprises, and they were drag racers. But they had a business of converting Ford Couriers into step sides. And then I would paint the step side beds to match, and I'd put 2 or 3 colored stripes on them, and they went to car lots. And so those guys there were all drag racers. The guys that worked in the shop were crew guys for guys like Don the Snake Prudhomme and Tom McEwen, and some pretty heavy hitters. Pat Galvin was the main guy, and he started hooking me up with funny car jobs. He'd tell me, this guy wants his funny car painted, do some renderings, and so that was awesome. So I got to start doing a lot of that stuff.
Wow. Now, with all your work and everything, is there a place where people can go see some of your work from over the years?
Yeah, I've got an Instagram account. It's PPG Paul.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm always thinking I was talking to another artist, and I was up with him out in Tucson, and he was telling me like the issue with the paint now is like when you're doing the paint scene in racing, it can't weigh too much. I'm like, huh? He's like, yeah, it can't weigh too much. He's like, I'm known as the guy who paints the lightest paint jobs. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, most of them just do wraps now. And I'm like, that's horrible because all the nostalgia behind it and like the custom paint, that's where it was born from, in my opinion, you know?
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
It's like, well, you can go from the customs and then you went to the drag scene. Like, what Bill contributed was just nuts. Yeah. Because it's like, I haven't seen anybody that does anything custom today that can't be attributed to, of course, you know, Bill Eater and Larry Watson and then Bill Carter. You know, there's a lot of great painters after those, but those guys to me made the most impact in the scene, you know, when it comes to custom paint. Do you have any other guys that, you know, that really inspired you besides those two?
Those were big influences, of course. And, you know, to say that I came up with this on my own would be a total lie. And I think most people that think they've invented something, yeah, you go back and look at what's going on in the 50s, it's like, well, it's the same thing. We just use it over and over, switch it up a little bit. But a lot of the local guys, Pete Santini, which is, I think we're close to the same generation, but man, I used to admire his stuff. He did a lot of magazine stuff that was cool. And there was Kenny Youngblood, of course. Yep. And he did a lot of his work was art and design, and he and Tom Kelly did a lot of the airbrushing grills, headlights. That was a big influence to me. There was a guy, Nat Quick, that did unbelievable lettering and stuff. I'm influenced by everybody and anybody. Oh yeah. So I'm going to leave out lots of people's names, but there were even the East Coast guys, and so Glenn. Oh, Glenn. I love watching Glenn letter.
To this day, it's so cool, man, to see that, you know, what he could still do. And I'm like, I'm totally inspired every time he does something. I'm like, that's just motivational right there. Yeah. And I look at it, I'm like, wow.
Glenn don't need an airbrush. He'll take 3 colors of paint on one brush and brush out a blend, and you're like going, I can't believe it. Looks like it was airbrushed.
Yeah. And I'm like, you know, I love the nostalgia stuff about it, but I know that, like, as time's progressed, I'm sure you started off with lacquers, right?
Yep, lacquers where it's at. For a long time. Not anymore.
And then it went to acrylic enamels, which nobody liked, right?
I remember Walt Prey was messing with custom paint jobs with acrylic enamels.
Really? How'd that work?
Because the lacquers, you know, they didn't last. They'd fade, they'd crack. Yep. And so he was doing cars, he was doing candies, you know, he was using transparent toners and blends, and they looked really good, except for they didn't have that really car show finish. They were a little peely. If they got some dirt in it, there's really nothing you could do about it. Yeah. So he did that for a while, and today I do everything in waterborne. And it is amazing what I
remember when that was like taboo to say. That was like a bad word.
It was. The turning point for me with waterborne was I figured it out. I basically had to. PPG told me that this is going to be what everybody has to use in the custom world, so figure it out. And at first I didn't like it. But I brought Bill Carter in. God rest his soul. Got to do this before he passed. And he turned around to me, and I had a few other custom painters, some lowrider guys in there. And he goes, God, it's about time. This is like lacquer again. And he attributed it to the way you use lacquer. Yeah. And so if done properly, it works good. And the colors are really vibrant and clean. You can make nice candies out of the toners, which is what we did back then. You know, my upbringing was not House of Color or Metal Flake. You know, those guys taught me you just get the different paint toners and use those for your candies. Then Metal Flake came along. House of Color came along actually before, but they were mostly, John didn't really sell it. You know, he made it for Art Hemsel and Arlen Ness, and kind of gave it to his friends to use. So you really couldn't go buy it. And Metal Flake kind of took off with it was in the paint stores.
That's when they came out there, Candy Apple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that line. I used to always think when I was younger, my dad was like, hey, I'm going to paint this candy apple green. I'm like, I've never seen a green candy apple. And he's like, no, it's just the color, it's the brand. I'm like, what are you talking about? Then they showed me the jar, candy apple. I said, isn't it all red? And he goes, no, it's like this one's brown. And I'm like, oh. That's wild, man. That freaked me out.
Hey, we should make candy apples in them other colors now. Huh?
Wouldn't that be wild? Yeah, there's like so many cool things that have come through with technology, man. Like over the years, I've seen waterborne go from horrible to where, like you said, right now. I mean, I use Createx. We were talking about that earlier, and what it does now is like, whoa.
Oh, they've come a long ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started airbrushing with it, and yeah, it was, they were all paint colors. They weren't transparent.
Well, tip dry was always the issue.
Oh,
man.
yeah, that was bad.
Especially if you're airbrushing, you're like, oh my gosh. But the stuff they have on now, I swear it does. It's how do they tout it? It's a what is it? Urethane resin suspended in a, or is it?
Well, it depends. Different paint companies have gone about it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
PPG actually is a pure latex paint.
Really?
Yeah, it came out of Europe.
Okay.
Italy. Then there was a company, Max Meyer, out of Europe, that they bought and combined it. Where some of the other paint companies, and I'm not up on it very much anymore since I retired, but they took and adapted their solvent-borne urethanes to be reduced with water and sprayed to meet the VOC compliance thing.
Yeah. That's changed everything.
But Createx, for example, it's pure latex, it's pure water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the other paint companies are now too.
Yeah, it's so neat to see how that's progressed, and it's actually brought back a lot of, like you said, the cool, features of what the lacquers used to be, but now you have it in a totally different format.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool stuff from back in the day that I wish they'd bring back. And I've tried to contribute as well. We brought back the crushed glass, and that was cool.
Oh,
as difficult it is to work with, I mean, if you know the how-tos behind it, which we got to do another tutorial on that. Yeah. There's a lot more information about how to, apply it better now.
I remember Bill Cushenberry, I think he was in North Hollywood. He was big back in the day with crushed glass.
Now, like when you had it back in the day, where were they sourcing it at back then? I have my stories and everything, but I'm curious to know if you knew.
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I was told, and I don't know if I believed it, they just went out and found beer bottles or whatever, and they just put it in a bag and beat the crap out of it.
Yeah, Christmas ornaments was the ones I was hearing.
Yeah.
They get the Christmas ornaments and they smash them.
Yeah.
They were silver coated. They put them in like a bag or a sock or something like that and just shut that one was there too.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so gnarly. Can you imagine how much coats of lacquer, as thin as it was?
Oh, yeah.
That's what they say. They go, my car's got 100 coats of lacquer or whatever. I'm like, well, you needed it, dude.
Of course, then they put the scare on everybody. So, like, you're breathing that. You're putting that glass in your lungs.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to cut yourself up from the inside. So it kind of died off.
Yeah. Yeah, but, I mean, nothing hits like it, man. That refraction is just amazing.
Yeah, it is.
It looks like Swarovski crystals. We were going out to eat last night, and the sidewalk had it in it.
Oh,
cool. The airport that we came from, it had it in there. I was like, man, just look how nice that looks. Bailing's back. Murano, that's one thing that we still can't get that one yet.
Murano was the best pearl ever.
Gosh, man, if you guys have any of that, send it to me. I'll use it. I'll put it to good use. But yeah, going through all your history, man, what are some of the cool vehicles that you were able to work on?
Well, of course, funny cars, because that's what I wanted to do. So I got a good funny car story. The first funny car I got to paint was a brand new Ford Mustang II. So that kind of smaller Mustang, and it was for the Beartown Shaker, Chicago, and I got that car all painted. I mean, I had some great ideas, and it turns out they just wanted it black with gold stripes to look like the Ford car. So I got it all painted. I took it out to Pomona for the Winter Nationals, the first race, and I didn't get out there till the next day. And I'm looking for it, and I see Pat Galvin, who's hooking me up with this stuff, and I go, "Where's the car?" And he goes, "Well, you weren't here yesterday, were you?" I go, "No." He goes, "Oh, it's in a pile down there. Burn it to the ground."
Oh, no.
I'm like, "What?" I go down there and find it, and I didn't take a picture of it before it left.
Oh, no.
And, so, yeah, it was.
Anybody got a picture of that?
Yeah. I did find one on the internet recently.
Okay, so send it to us.
So I did find a picture of it. So the last funny car I painted was a couple of years ago, and I think it's going to be the end. I got a bookend it. It was for Bob Tasca, and it was a brand new Ford Mustang for that year. And it was a PPG deal, so I got to do this PPG special paint job on it. And he took it to the Gator Nationals, which 2 years ago was the first race of the season. And in qualifying, he destroyed the body. So I'm like,
Mustangs aren't your thing, and then,
yeah.
Oh wow, that's
But
wild.
I've had a lot of good ones in between that survived, and that's been fun. I've got to paint an Indy car for Penske for the Indy 500 and do a blend on it that they wanted done. I painted some big trucks and trailers. Painted some for PPG for the Good Guys shows. What else have I painted? That's kind of cool. I painted a biplane one time, all with neons, fabric type plane. That was fun to do.
Really?
It was really bright until it faded.
That's what it says. Like, was it just like for a special project that they knew it wasn't going to last?
Well, it was for a manufacturer actually here in Idaho that built kit foxes, is what they were called. And so this was his first plane, so he wanted it. He wanted it bright and
there you
snazzy
go.
up. I guess he didn't think about if it would last. But
Yeah.
it turned white.
Yeah, that's one thing right there. I wish that we deal with a bunch of UV issues in Arizona. The Southwest is brutal. Candies, man. I hammer those things on like at least 6 coats just to make sure that it has enough depth to it and everything, so that way it lasts long. There's other tricks where you can use candy base coats and all that stuff.
Try it out.
But
that's the thing with water.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using water-based toners.
Okay.
And they don't fade.
Really?
PPG, and I'm sure other paint companies have there's a new technology for some of the new cars out there, like Mazda and Ford, that look candy red.
Yeah.
That's not dye. It's
what is
pigment.
It? Okay.
And so it doesn't fade.
Yeah.
So now, I did Joe Ray's Eldorado, and I used that new red on it, and he will not take it out in the sun. And I did a front end as a test before we painted it, and it's been sitting in the sun. And his boss, before the magazine kind of got dissolved, they come by a lot. His boss was asking me, "Is there something I can do? Because Joe won't take this out in the sun." I told him it's okay. I bring him around the back. I go, "Here's the color. It's been sitting out here for 5 years now." And I had some tape over a part of it. I pulled the tape off. I go, "See any color difference?" And he's like, and he looks at Joe, and Joe's giving me a dirty look. I didn't think Joe believed me. He just didn't want to be running it all over the country. And it was his baby. And
he didn't want it outside.
It got wrecked a couple times.
I think there's like a status.
Cried.
Yeah, there's a status issue. If you have your car indoor, it's because it's a better car. It's like more of a showpiece.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's so many things that are sun activated. You don't appreciate it until you see what happens in the sun.
Yeah. Well,
that's such a tragedy.
It's disheartening.
Yeah, because there's certain lights that can actually mimic it and catch it to a certain degree.
Right.
But man, if you don't get it on the sun, you're not going to really appreciate it. You're like,
yeah, they need to be out in the sun.
Yeah, but don't do that in the summer in Arizona. You say you retired, but you're still painting, right?
Well, yeah. How can I not?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So now you get to do all the fun stuff?
Yeah. Well, I really pick and choose, and I price it.
Well, I bet.
If they don't like the price, see ya.
Shoot.
I don't think I ever did it for the money. I mean, I wanted the money, but
it
was hard to get the money, but I did it because I loved it, and I still do it, and I love it. So I try to get more money, and if they don't want to give it to me, I can give it up.
You know what? That's the other thing too. I think that when you're dealing with custom paint, and it's like it's a physical thing. You have to be able to get underneath. You got to get in the jams. You got to get underneath the rocker panels and everything. And you're bending your knees to get down in there.
Oh.
You do all that stuff. Your back. Heck, the weight of a cup itself puts how much on your shoulder. Especially if it's a full one.
Well, I feel like I'm 70 years old. Oh, I am. So I guess I feel like I'm 90 years old. Yeah, and I never gave this a thought of how hard this would be on your body.
Yeah.
But you described it perfectly. You're up and down. The spray gun. The spray guns are a lot lighter than they used to be, but they're still heavy.
Yeah, I always tell him, I have a buddy of mine. He was suffering from his rotator cuff, and he's having I don't even know if I can even paint anymore. I was like, dude, why don't you just use a pressure cup or a pressure pot? He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, you never heard of one of those? I had to show him and everything. He's like, oh wow, dude, I didn't know this existed.
I bought one of those in my probably mid-20s. I was working at a shop, and we were painting completes, Lincolns, big Cadillacs, and I'm like, this is for the birds.
Mid-20s. We're using a big 7?
Yeah, it was.
I figured.
So I got to develop this in a pressure, a 2-quart pot, and that was great. Oh, so this is a funny story. So I was Southern California. I was around a lot of vans and did a lot of vans too. And so I had a buddy in a van club, and Associated Vans. If you're Southern California, they were a pretty big club. This guy took a Dodge van and put a Buick Vista top on it. Actually, I put the top on it for him. He wanted that. And he wanted the whole van painted a kind of a root beer brown, and it was an enamel job. And I'm like, oh man, I need a better gun. He goes, oh, my dad paints houses. We got pressure pots. So he's got this big 5-gallon pot. So I go to the paint store. I get 2 gallons of brown, mix it up, pour it in the pot, hook it all up, pull the trigger. I start painting the roof. I run out of paint. I put 2 gallons of paint on the roof, and it's flowing down into the drip rails, and it's glass. Best enamel paints I've ever painted. I go back to the paint store and I go, I ran out of paint. And the guy goes, what are you painting? And I told him, and he goes, you ran out of 2 gallons of paint? I go, yeah, I didn't know it would take that much. He goes, what are you using? I go, oh, pressure pot. I got a 5-gallon pot. And he goes, bring the gun back. So, I didn't know. So I go in there with the gun, and he goes, holy crap. He goes, this has got way too big of a fluid tip. This is for painting latex house paint that's thick. So we put a really small fluid tip in it, and I painted the rest of the van with not even a gallon.
That's hilarious.
So that's my pressure pot story. But I love those things. I still, today, if I'm going to clear coat a car, I get the 2-quart cup out.
That totally makes sense, man.
Yeah, that gun's a lot lighter. And I used to have a little mini gun that was, I think it was a DeVellis gun that would hook to a pressure pot. So when I'm doing frames or chassis, man, that little thing, you could twist it around and get around everything. And
yeah.
so,
you know what I miss, man, is you can still find them now, every now and then, are the steer cups.
Oh
the
yeah,
metal flake.
Yeah.
Gosh, those things were so rad.
Yeah.
Because you can put some chunky stuff in there and it never caught.
I'm pushing water again.
Okay.
I put metal flake in my cup, gravity cup.
Yeah.
To flake a car, and it doesn't settle.
Oh, because of suspension agents?
The technology is anti-settle in the waterborne, or at least ours.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the flakes don't go to the bottom.
Yeah. Because I use Createx and it does suspend.
Yeah. So that is awesome, because if you want to shoot metal flake in a gravity feed gun, you're a fool.
Yeah.
You go and it
plugs up. I know when we were starting to sell the glass, we were telling people to do dry spray.
Yeah.
And then we'd get messages like, hey, this stuff is clogging in my gun. How do you shoot it?
Right.
And I'm like, what are you using? And they said, well, I'm using, such and such gun. And I'm like, that's a gravity fed.
Yeah.
No, you got to dry spray it on there. And I was like, really? He's like, I had one guy that actually was able to do it, but he used our fine, and he only put a little bit in at the time. I was like, man, you guys are really making it difficult and stuff. But I'm like, the reason why it's clogging up, it's the equivalency of weight and sand.
Yeah.
That's how they make glass, man. You're melting sand, turning it into glass. So you can't do it, brother. You can't do it. So yeah, that's one of my stories for that.
I had a lot of crazy opportunities with PPG, and so Harley Davidson uses PPG. They started out with House of Color, but I think, somewhere probably in the 80s or so, they switched. And so we came out with this metal flake, it's mini flake. Mm-hmm. And Harley decided to do a series of bikes a few years back in the different flake colors. Okay. And so I get a call from PPG's people, and it's like, yeah, we need your help. And I go, what's up? And he goes, well, Harley's trying to use flake, and it's plugging up their lines. And they have an automated system. They have paint that runs through maybe, a couple 100 feet of lines till it gets to these guns and sprays these things as it's going through the system. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, so they don't have filters in those lines, do they? Well, yeah, they've got it filtered all the way down. So it's plugging up. Oh, yeah, I guess it would, wouldn't it? Yeah, they got to take them out. So I talked to the guy again. I said, so what was the outcome? They said they refused to take the filters out because they were going to get dirt in the paint. What do you think metal flake is? Exactly. That's so funny. So they kind of quit doing those bikes. They didn't do too many anymore, I guess.
Well, were you using PPG when they came out with their micro sequence flake?
Oh man, I wish I could get some of those.
Exactly, right? What made that flake so special?
I don't know anything about it then. Well, actually, I didn't work for PPG. I was just a painter when that came out.
I was just curious about that.
And I still have about a jar of the gold.
Okay.
But yeah, I really like that stuff. And it didn't plug anything up either.
Yeah.
But it's the shape of it has got a lot to do with it because it looks much bigger than it is.
Yeah, because it had more flash, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to give you some of ours and have you try it.
Yeah.
We came out with a line called Freak Flake. Shout out to our company, Freak Flake.
All right.
Yeah. Anyhow.
I love the name, Freak Flake.
Oh, yeah. It was unintentional, but it was a great journey. And it still is.
All right.
So now that, you've told some stories and everything, what are some of the stories, man, that you could say that would help benefit somebody who's like barely getting into painting or even wanting to start?
Oh, man, you better get trained. Whatever kind of paint you want to use, most of the major brands have training classes.
Mm-hmm.
You need to find out how paint really works, how to mix it properly. You need to find out how to use a paint gun to your advantage. There's quite a few people now, including me, we teach custom paint classes. In fact, I'm doing a class in February in LA at the training center in Ontario. Class is full, don't get too excited. But you can contact a PPG salesperson and say you're interested. A lot of custom painters have gotten with companies, and so there's quite a bit of those classes available. In fact, I think there's a couple in LA during that week of the car show. And you can't learn enough. I mean, I even learn from the students that take these classes. I see them do something that's like, I never thought of that.
Like, you want to share some of those?
No. You gotta take the class.
I was curious. Out of your I'm like, well, I'd like to learn something new.
Well, a lot of it too is just ideas. I just taught a class here at the college, and these kids are just now taking auto body and paint class, and a lot of the colleges offer like a week of custom painting. Mm-hmm. So I got a pre-planned panel that they're laying out a graphic paint job, and we start with metal flake. We're doing it all in water, and then they have these panels that they're allowed to do some things in it. I give them some ideas. You can use some lace here. We can do some shading, tape shading or fanning. We'll do some saran wrap and marbleizing. Show them different things, and I'll be darned if these guys won't do something I never even thought of, and it looks cool. They'll put a piece of paper in there and wad it up and streak it, and I'm like, I like that. They take rubbing compound and squirt it in the panel as a pattern, and they pull it off. And they'll take and do something different with that. They'll smear it around instead. And I'm like, I'm watching them. I'm going, I don't think that's going to look good. And when they're done, I said, well, that's pretty cool. I'll have to try that. Yeah, and I don't know what's out there. It's like everything's been done and redone.
Exactly, right?
And then I hear painters go, yeah, they stole that from me.
Oh, gosh.
I'm like, well, you ought to go look at something Art Hemsel did.
No joke.
Yeah, where did he steal it from? Because that was done then. Stuff was done in the 50s. We're seeing now. I can do an acetylene smoke look with water.
Really?
Water is really cool to pound onto the panel wet and then back off the trigger, and just with the air you can manipulate it, move it around.
And I started off in this late, even though my dad's a pinstriper, and I've mentioned this before. Like I always feel like I'm trying to make up for lost time, and I'm like, man,
you can't.
It's like you can't. Exactly.
You just gotta go.
So, like working towards the future, man. It's like, what do you want to see, like, in the upcoming years of like custom paint? Because I'm always curious, like with the technology of wraps, and I've heard that like there's one body shop says they're not even letting us paint these bumpers anymore. They're coming pre-painted, or they're not even pre-painted. The color's injected, molded into the actual
into
plastics, because the front ends are always what's getting damaged.
At one point, that's not new. That's been going on a long time. BMW looked at doing that. So did General Motors. And amazingly, one of the biggest problems with that is inventory.
Okay.
So if you needed a blue bumper for your car, they had to keep those in stock. Well, how many blue cars are out there? How many bumpers?
Yeah, no joke.
So you'd have to have that bumper for that model in 12 different colors readily available. But it's the problem with paint in this world is the pollution, and it's really the VOCs, volatile organic compounds. That's what's in the solvents. That's how come waterborne has stepped in. But even waterborne paint has some VOC in it.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid we've already heard this legislation's changing in California by 2030 or something. They're going to lower the level again, and I don't know how to get much lower than it is now.
I guess the best thing I would do is just to learn how to use a computer. Like, you can start making your graphics in that thing, because then you could do probably a layered wrap or some kind of ink wrap over that flake base. Can you imagine having a lowrider totally wrapped in a flake base with like candy patterns, pinstriping, and everything on there, and it's a wrap?
It's a wrap.
Gosh, I don't know, man.
I'm afraid we'll see it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like, okay, it's airbrushing. I remember like Airbrush Action. That magazine was so cool. So, I
love that magazine.
Influential, because everybody, got so many ideas. They had so many tutorials in there and everything, but they had this one machine. It never took off, but it was literally a machine. You could put a hood in front of it, and it would inkjet like a mural that you had.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, and I was like, no way, that's gonna kill a bunch of murals. It didn't, obviously, it didn't take off.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how far are they from actually doing murals in ink on a vehicle?
And I think the good thing is the technology and the equipment to make that happen is going to be so expensive. There's still going to be a place for us.
I hope so.
There's going to always be somebody that just wants something done by hand. I just don't see that going.
That's the one thing that I'm encouraged by, because remember when vinyl first came out, killed all the pinstriping industry and the sign painting, of course.
Oh yeah.
No, but now what I've seen that I've been really encouraged about is like there's been a real draw to actually having hand painted signs.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys that are into tattooing are now starting to do it. I remember when I saw the pinstriping scene, there's not a lot of people my age actually pinstriping. Right. They're usually in their 30s or in their late 60s, or early 50s, whatever. No, early 50s is kind of like that bubble that happened when the vinyl industry came in.
Yeah.
And nobody in that generation was doing it anymore. So it's like when the rat rod scene came in, to me, that's when I saw the resurgence, because nobody could find a pinstriper.
Right.
So like, well, how do I do it? So I started doing it on their own. And now you got this new generation of like pinstripers. And the one thing we always hear is like, oh man, that's a dying art. That's a lost art form, whatever. I'm like, I think it's more popular now than it's been in a long time.
I'm very encouraged because, you guys will be at the Pomona Car Show and doing the panel jams. And every year there are so many young kids doing that and people I've never seen or heard of. And so it's growing. It's growing back.
And it's like, I have people that come up to me and they say, oh, I can't do that. I can barely draw a stick figure. And I'm like, I never met a person or a kid that wasn't born an artist. Give them some chalk and a crayon or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
They'll go to town. I'm like, when's the last time you drew? They're like, well, I haven't drawn since I was in grade school. I said, what were you drawing? Stick figures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, there you go. You just stopped drawing, Yeah. And I'm like, you could do this, because I never know when I'm gonna meet the next pinstriper. And the pinstripers that started in their retirement age, and of course these little kids that come up to you, and then like 3 years later they're still doing it.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that is rad.
So Mitch Kim.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He does stick figures.
That's an inside joke, and it's well worth one researching.
Find out who Mitch Kim is. It's in the Northwest.
Yeah, he's not the only one that does that. That was kind of like a fad that happened during that time, right?
Dale was another guy up in Spokane.
Yeah. Because I remember Ruben Holguin is one of my other, aspiring mentors, and I was at his shop with my dad, and they trade work all the time because one couldn't do it, the other guy referred to the other dude. And so they were talking about a Harley that he got referred to, and he was doing a roll pan on this 92 Chevy, and he was doing 5 colored lines all along the roll pan.
Wow.
So he was on the ground and he was striping. He's right-handed. He was striping, and he's talking to my dad as he's striping, and he's like looking at him, and then he's pulling the line. He goes, yeah. He goes back, and I'm like, I've never seen anybody else stripe, only my dad. And I'm like looking at it, and I was like, oh, he's gonna have to get up and move. That's gonna suck. Nope. He talks to my dad, pallets it, grabs it with his left hand, and he goes around the corner. Wow. I was like, oh my God, you know, I'm like, I've never seen that. That's just wild. So when I'm taking off, you know, we're taking off from that his shop, and I start telling my dad the story. He goes, "Oh yeah, Ruben's good.
Yeah,
he's been doing it longer than I have. Yeah, he's good." And I'm like, wow, I've always wanted to do that. And I remember I was doing this one vehicle, and I was striping it. I'm like, I'm gonna try it out, and I'm like, sure enough, I pulled it off, and I was like, what? That was a milestone. Yeah, that was just a milestone. And I think one of the coolest stories you were telling me about was the no wipe thing.
So my pinstriping career started out as I took a sign painting class, and doing drag race cars, I need to be able to sign my name on them. And I pretty much have been around amazing pinstripers all my painting career, from Bob Bond, Jim Mosier in Southern California, Larry Glogie, and then, you know, as things progressed, there's a guy, Jeff Devey, here in Twin Falls, that's just amazing. He too is kind of retired, so I got to talk real nice to get him to come and do something for me. But I've just always relied on other pinstripers. I took the class so I could sign my name. So I'm in Northern California, and I'm painting a Pro Street Camaro. It's like a 71 bright orange, definitely a Bill Carter inspired paint jobs. Was one of my highlights because it made every major magazine cover.
Oh, nice.
I'm in Twin Falls, first magazine I saw it on, or I'm not even in Twin, I'm in a little fishing town south of there. I go in to get something, and I see that magazine on the rack, and I grabbed it, and there was another one, so I grabbed it and I bought them, and the lady behind the rack, she goes, "You know you're buying two of the same magazines." I go, "Yeah, I painted that car." She goes, "Yeah, sure you did."
Really? That's hilarious.
Pop my balloon, but anyway, so I painted it, and that was a lacquer job. That was mostly metal flake, and that was in Sacramento. And Jim Mosier was doing cars for us. We were restoring a lot of Maseratis, and he was doing striping on them, and the people loved it. So had him coming down to do this Camaro, and he's going, "I don't know why you don't do this." And I go, "I can't do this." He goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Here, let me see." Gave me a brush, and so I powdered out some paint. I started pulling some lines, and then I stopped, and I got back, and I wasn't doing it on the Camaro. And I wiped it off, and then I started again, and I wiped that a little bit back, and he goes, "Oh, there's your problem." I go, "What?" He said, "You can't wipe it off." I said, "What do you mean you can't wipe it off?" He goes, "That's a crutch. As long as you do that, you're not going to try hard enough, because you know, that's good. Oh, I don't like that. I can't wipe it off." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." Well, it actually worked. And then years later, I'm in Sacramento at a Warren Tech. They put in and they had a custom paint class. They put in a big campus there, and automotive was part of it. And so we were there one day, and I was showing a lot of custom stuff, and the instructor says, "Now, tomorrow, can you show them some pinstriping stuff?" So I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So the next day I'm in there, and so I'm showing them how to hold a brush and pull some lines and palette and stuff. And there's a pretty good crowd standing there besides the students. And I told them, I said, "Now there's a guy here in Northern California, he's up in Auburn, named Jim Mosier. And the best advice he ever gave me, and I'm going to give it to you, is never wipe off your mistake, because you're never going to get any better if you do." And Jim comes walking through the crowd and goes, "Right on, you know." And he said, "Oh, you tried that, it worked, huh?" I'm like, I look at the instructor, I go, "You set me up, dude."
That's hilarious.
"No, I didn't. I didn't know you knew Jim."
You know, that's the funny thing is like, I've gone to a bunch of brush bashes over the years, and it does the intimidation factor of like, you don't want to screw up in front of your peers.
Oh yeah.
Really puts you on point.
Yeah.
Yeah. You do get better.
I've never gone to one like that because of that. I'm like, I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's really cool. And like I tell people all the time, it's like, you know, that I remember Daniel. You know, shout out to Daniel. They're Temecula. Anyways, he wouldn't want to stripe in front of us. I'm like, "Dude, just knock it out, dude."
Right.
You know, and he's like, no. You know, we finally got him out of his show because he didn't have that confidence. But now he's knocking out some really cool work.
That's awesome.
You have to push yourself out there, and you have to push yourself.
You have
You
to
know,
push
it-
yourself in practice.
Yeah, that peer pressure, whatever pressure you need. They say, how do you make diamonds? It's out of pressure.
Everybody's got to start out.
Did you ever get to go to the Ed Roth brush bashes? I know you said you didn't go to them bashes.
No, I never did go to any Ed Roth ones. I knew Ed Roth personally, actually, but I know Hot Dog always wants me to come and do some stuff, and there's that other guy down there that's been doing them for years. And, Foreman, I think.
Yeah, Ron Foreman.
Yeah,
Well,
Ron Foreman's. I mean, those guys are the best of the best.
Mhm.
They're not just laying down some stripes; they're creating beautiful pieces of
that
art.
was the one thing right there. I've always been striving to work towards, because to me that was the epitome of kind of like being invited to the Academy Awards type.
Oh,
of thing.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
I'm like, if you have never seen a Ron Foreman brush bash on, now with technology, just hashtag Ron Foreman show or no, what do they call it? The brush off.
Brush off.
Yeah. Yeah, brush off. And then when you look at all those images, you'll see exactly what we're talking about. Like Willis Dormer, that dude right there, his pinstriping is impeccable.
Yeah.
It does look like it was plotted.
Yeah. Oh,
It's just
nice.
amazing. And I'm like, man, if I can get invited to that show, it's and I know that I've accomplished something. It's one of those personal goals of mine,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's like,
It would be.
and I've had people tell me like, well, you should tell me. I could probably get you in. I'm like, I don't want to do that. It's got to be an invite only, and like I don't want to take away from none of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where I'm like, if I didn't earn it, I don't want to be there.
Right.
But if you want to see some incredible, like we don't have pinheadlounge.com no more. There is a Pinstripers Garage on Facebook, and then there is a Pinhead Lounge on Facebook. But you never know what you're gonna get on there. You used to be able to look at the top 100 or top 10 on the Pinhead Lounge, and you could see like all the ones that had the most likes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you saw some stuff from like Zeke Lemansky, and who else was on there? Well, shoot, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was cool in there. There's also the Mac Hall of Fame. That's another one that's good that you could see for like pinstriping. But
As I've traveled around this country
Mhm.
and going to Australia, Canada, Hawaii, doing custom paint classes, every town's got a really good pinstriper.
isn't that cool?
90% you probably never hear of because they're not doing it. I mean, it's just they love the art and they're good at it.
Yeah,
Some of them want to be out there in the headlines, which there's nothing wrong with that, or be the guy. But there's a lot of them that are humble and there is a lot of talent out there.
yeah.
And as long as they're willing to keep going and help people and teach them, it's not going to go away.
Thank God. And it's so weird. It's like I remember when we started to do, like when me and Spock, first met up. We started doing like gallery like shows.
Oh, okay.
And we were doing gallery shows because there was guys there that were starting to do custom culture in that scene. And then we had this one lady from the Phoenix Library, or she's like, you need to do this stuff at our show and everything.
Oh, wow.
And like everybody was freaking out because you didn't see this in the gallery scene because this is kind of like a lowbrow art.
That's true.
You see, stuff now, like the Peterson Museum, they started putting up that hood display right now.
Right.
And they got all the
part of that
lowrider stuff.
exhibit.
Yeah.
That is nice.
And then Tribal, they put out their show, and they brought in all the heavy hitters from back in the day and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're seeing more and more like custom paint in fine art settings now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so cool. So if anything, if it doesn't continue on vehicles, maybe that'll be the next genre it could continue in. But I'm like, because nobody's gonna go to a gallery show and see a rap.
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. You never know. Maybe they'll come out some kind of art genre for that. But that was one thing that I was worried about and stuff. I was like, oh, you know what? The gallery scene was always something that's kind of like looked down on. People that weren't into fine art. But it's like everywhere you go, when you're doing pinstriping, people just stop.
Yeah.
And they just start looking, and they always ask, you don't mind if I look, right? Or is it okay to take a picture? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I remember when I was first doing it, I'm like, oh God, I don't want no one looking at me. I don't care where you're at in your pinstriping career. There's always room for improvement, but I've always attributed to kind of like a gym membership. You know, you have to you'll have that muscle memory, but if you don't keep going to the gym, you kind of start to lose it.
You do, yeah. No, I agree. With airbrushing, pinstriping, lettering, you gotta. In fact, when I'm teaching these kids some of this stuff, I tell them you need to warm up a little bit. Don't just walk out there and pick up the brush and start going.
Mm-hmm.
Palette some paint, run your fingers through it, do a couple of lines, get comfortable, and then go.
Oh yeah.
You don't got to start on the hood. Oops, I messed that up. Now we got to wipe it off. No, you can't.
I'm gonna have to put that more into practice because it's one of those things where I'm like, as long as the result in the end comes out, I'm good. Right. But I know it slows me down more than I probably should.
Yeah.
Because I could put more effort into it. But since some of those angles, if you've never pinstriped on anything but a panel, do yourself a favor. Get something that's 3D. Go to a local body shop, and I'm sure they'll have a spare fender for you to work on or something like that.
Yeah.
Because
stripe a door jam. Oh
yeah.
Man.
Oh god. The door jam, or you know what? Some of you guys right now, it's Christmas time. Go get some ornaments. Make sure they're plastic ones. Don't use none of the glass ones.
Yeah.
But just try to stripe on something that's round, spherical.
Yep.
That's a true testament. Remember the bowling pins?
Oh yeah.
Man, bowling pins are probably one of the best things to practice on. I think.
Well, I used to do. Well, I still do. I do a lot of helmets.
Oh yeah.
Mostly for racers. Mm-hmm. And I'd pinstripe them. And I remember Jeff Debbie one time talking to him. I go, man, these are hard. And he goes, yeah, that's the hardest thing to stripe. It's round. You got to go around and around. And it's like, man, I just thought it was me. I got something better. I got to tell you my first pinstriping experience.
All right.
So this is in the 70s. So I had a 71 El Camino. I painted candy blue, my first candy job. And so, I know of Walt Prey really well. And so I wanted Walt to pinstripe my car. So I made an appointment. I took it down there. And I'll tell you one thing I liked best about Walt. Walt was very helpful, very complimentary. He goes, oh, wow. He goes, this is nice. How many of these have you done? It's my first one. And it had some blotchiness on the sides and a little bit of, I think I didn't get a good walk in the car. Every once in a while, I got a little too much on the door jamb. And, so he's pointing all this out to me, and he's telling me, if you do this, I'm like, oh, wow, cool. And I was half thinking he was just going to embarrass me and go, this looks like crap. Mm-hmm. He goes, I'll fix this up for you really nice. And he says, come back at 6:00 and it'll be done. So I'm like, all right. And I was really excited. So I left, and this friend of mine is going to take me back, and he comes to my work, and he's anxious to go see what happens. And come on, let's go. So we get there, and it's 5:00. Mm-hmm. We walk in there, and my car is sitting in the middle of his shop. There's nothing done to it. And he's not in there. He's walking around. I'm looking for him, and I see him walking down from the end of the buildings. There's a dairy. He's got a case of beer under his arm and a piece of salami. And he yells at me. He goes, what are you doing here? I told you 6:00. And I'm like, I go, can we just wait? He goes, no, get out of here. So, okay. So we come back at 6:30. Mm-hmm. Now he's madder this time. All the beer cans are all around the car, empty. And he's sitting on the ground, leaning up against his building. And he's like, you're late. It's like, I'm a half an hour late. Well, this is what he did. He double lined the car all the way around the car, did panels, probably about 8 sets down the hood and around the tailgate. And then the whole thing has got scrolls. Mm-hmm. It's a ton of striping. He did it. I don't know how long it took him, but, I gave him an hour.
Wow.
And it was done. That half an hour, he was just sitting there waiting on me. And I'm just like, oh, wow, I could never do this. Look how fast he did that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But I don't know. So that was my introduction to pinstriping.
Gosh. Man.
But Bill Carter was, and everybody said this, and it's true. He was a master at putting colors together.
Yeah, exactly.
His colors. And really, if you start looking at his paint jobs, there's not a lot of crazy stuff going on. It's just the way the colors are blended.
Yeah.
You can just put put one panel on this car and just make it jump out all by itself.
I guess we'll wrap it up with that. I
Right.
really appreciate you spending some time with us.
You bet, man.
And it was been great, seeing you. And we'll see you at the Grand Nationals again,
Now I want to
right?
go out and stripe something.
All right. All right. Peace
Thanks.
out, guys.